Thank you all so much for joining us this Saturday afternoon for most of us, Saturday morning for Heather, since she's calling in from Canada. Thank you so much, Heather, for joining us today.
Thank you
Um,
for letting me be here.
Thank you. Yes, Heather LeGuilloux, right? Did I pronounce that right?
LeGuilloux.
LeGuilloux. See, I'm
Yeah.
doing too much. She is a registered clinical counselor and a stress blogger. And so she's going to be talking to us today about how to alleviate chronic stress and anxiety. And if you have any questions for Heather, please post them in the comment below. I will be checking this throughout the call today to make sure that I'm capturing all of your comments for her. And let me just click this to make sure that I can see it. All right, great, we're live. Hi, Mom. My mom's in the chat box. Hey, Ronald. I can hear you, but it seems to be breaking up a bit. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I'm hoping that should get cleared up shortly. Um, Great. So I can see everyone's comments. If you have any questions for Heather, like I said, post them in the comments below, and I'll be sure to pose them to her. And so today we're talking about anxiety and chronic stress. And Heather is going to tell us in just a bit the difference between the two, chronic stress and anxiety. And I know we kind of talked about it during Stress Awareness Month. We were talking about how to relieve stress, but today we're going to really dig in on anxiety and having these recurring thoughts that kind of keep us in this sick state mentally that manifests itself physically. So I want to share a personal story with you all. I actually had an anxiety attack twice. Now, I'm going to, just be completely honest. Like, I'm just 30 years old. So when the first time I had it, I really freaked out because I thought I was dying. I was in a moving car in the passenger seat, thank God. And it was at a time where I felt like I was failing. Like there was an obligation I had to meet that I couldn't meet, and I felt like I was failing and that the world was crumbling down on me. And the car was moving, and I was like struggling to get the window down. I had my head out the window trying to get air into my lungs, and I couldn't get any air into my lungs. Like I literally felt like I was dying. My husband was driving the car. He had to pull over and console me and calm me down. That was the first time. The second time I had an anxiety attack, oh my gosh, Heather, you're going to find this so hilarious. Because now it's funny. Before it wasn't funny.
For sure.
Yeah, but the second time, I was just trying to move my website to a different hosting provider. Can you believe that? And I was freaking out because I was so overwhelmed and it wasn't working out. And I'm like, my business is going to fail. Everything I've done has been a complete waste. Like all of these thoughts are coming into my head. And I was so overcome with this, like, anxiety. Like I couldn't breathe. My lungs just would not open to get any air. I was like in this office trying to get the window open. I couldn't get enough air out the window, so I ran outside to take a walk till I finally calmed down. But literally both those times, like I thought I was gonna die. My lungs just wouldn't work, and it was just the scariest experience ever. So I just wanted to share that with you guys to just kind of give you an example. If you haven't had an anxiety attack, or maybe you have had and didn't know that that's what it was, that's been my experience. And that's why I think that this conversation is so crucial, because I know from the research I've done, like I don't know if you've read The Telomere Effect, Heather, which was a great book about how stress, affects our DNA and can be passed on to our children, like being able to handle situations without having that effect on the body, And so we're going to talk about today too, like all the stuff that it does to the digestive system and all of that.
Right.
So Heather, if you can explain for everybody the difference between
Mhm.
anxiety and chronic stress.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for sharing those examples. I think that's a great, real life experience of what can happen, and anxiety really is quite common, and it's also quite normal. It's a chemical response in our body that happens when there's something out of the ordinary happening. So you might have heard about the flight or fight response. Or in my example, usually I just sort of freeze. If there's something, for example, another real life example would be I was hiking in the woods in Canada, and, it can be quite normal to come across a bear, so there's a bear in the path, and, your body, without you, even realizing it, goes into the response, and that's the same thing as an anxiety response. The difference can be, the situation. So the examples that you were sharing, instead of there being, some sort of, stimuli like the bear, it's more to do with chronic stress. So the thoughts that were coming in, all of the worries, all of the, catastrophic thinking, is my blog going to just explode and my business going to come along with it, right? Those are real worries, especially for bloggers and people, entrepreneurs, that can create a lot of stress, and it can actually send our body to send those signals into anxiety. So, in Canada, we call it a panic attack, where, you're feeling like you can't get enough air. Maybe your heart is racing, your palms are sweaty. Those are, typical symptoms of an anxiety or panic attack. And I would like to also point out that it's not necessarily always going to feel like a panic attack. Anxiety can come in a lot of different ways, and it can be, some people can have anxiety on a, day-to-day basis where it's quite low and it's manageable, but it's there, so that they might have racing thoughts, or, they might feel their palms get sweaty if they have to talk to someone or be in public or something like that. But you might not notice it, right? Looking at that person, you might not have any idea that they're experiencing anxiety in that moment. Mm-hmm. So in that way, it's quite normal. It's an evolutionary response to dangerous stimuli that has stuck with us to this day. So in a lot of cases, like the ones that you're talking about, you're in a car, you're in the passenger seat, so, you don't really have to think about every moment, but you still experienced a panic attack because of what was happening, inside of you and all the worries that were happening. So, I think the purpose of today is going to be about, talking about how anxiety and chronic stress can, impact us in a holistic way throughout the mind and the body, and ways to try to alleviate that.
Yeah, so like in terms of digestion, so I know, like for me, I couldn't breathe, I was feeling chest pains. I know it can cause heartburn. Can it also cause sluggish digestion? Have you seen that?
For sure, yes. So that's something called the mind-body connection. And, a long time ago, it was thought that, anxiety or stress, things like that, it was all happening just in the mind. So, if you can imagine sort of like a cutoff right at your neck and everything happening up here. But, with research and, lots of psychological studies, it's now quite known that the mind-body connection is there. So anything that's happening in your mind, the anxiety, the chemicals that are sent, the stress that you experience, in your daily life, can really impact all throughout your body, including your digestion. So that can be, sluggish digestion, that can be bloating, it can be things like diarrhea, all kinds of different things can happen with just that connection with, the thoughts that are happening, the anxiety that builds up, and how it can trickle down to things like your gut, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and so no amount of probiotics and digestive enzymes is really going to help that if that's a chronic situation that keeps occurring. So what can we do then to stop like these catastrophic thoughts, as you pose it, from coming in and kind of doing that to our bodies?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a good point that you bring up first about probiotics, because some people do have, different digestion issues in terms of their physical health. Mm-hmm. So I would say it's always a good idea to talk to a doctor if it is something that's chronically happening for you, so that you can kind of rule out what is happening. Mm-hmm. And if you see a doctor and they're sort of saying everything seems fine, there's no sort of underlying physical issue, then it would be a good idea to consider what's happening, in your mind and the thoughts that are happening, and to really sort of identify what kind of anxiety or stress is happening. So doing a bit of a checklist of, what's happening in your life, where is the most stress happening. And for a lot of people, it really depends on the situation, but work can be a huge stressor. There's a lot of responsibilities placed on a person at work. And it can be necessary for financial reasons or other reasons for you to work really hard. And it can be often really easy to forget to really take care of yourself, and to really slow down and to consider what's happening for you. And so once you do that checklist, looking at your work-life balance, what about, responsibilities in your family, other health conditions, things like that may be causing you stress, thinking about ways that you can reduce the stress and the anxiety that you are feeling. And then also putting in ways of taking care of yourself, so promoting self-care activities as well. And then on the other end of the spectrum, if somebody's having reoccurring panic attacks, like the ones that you suggested earlier, it could be something a lot more chronic or a lot more severe. And in that case, I would always recommend to, consider talking to someone, consider talking to either friends or family, or a counselor, therapist, a pastor, anyone that somebody could feel comfortable with, because it can really depend on the situation. And oftentimes we can overlook what's happening for us, and it can be hard to pinpoint what is really causing the stress and anxiety. So it can be good to have another person to talk to and to really figure out what's going on.
Okay, so just to recap, basically, if you are having anxiety attacks, then you need to talk to somebody about the anxiety attacks that you're having.
Yeah, it can be really tough, especially if they're extreme like that, where, it's can be debilitating, if you can't breathe, if you're not able to sort of be in public, that could really impact your work, your family life, a lot of different areas of your life. Mm-hmm. And so if it's starting to impact your daily living, it can be really good to have some more support, and to know that anxiety is normal. It's a normal phenomenon. It's in all of us. But if it gets to the point where it's really impacting on your life, it can be really important to have more support with that, so that you're not going through it alone.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then you mentioned self-care. So like, what kind of self-care activities could stave off that kind of anxiety?
I am a huge advocate of mindfulness. And it's kind of become a buzzword now, to be mindful, but I think it's because it really works. It really works for a lot of people. And the basis of it is to really slow down, to, consider yourself in the situation that you're in, and to sort of accept what's coming. So to accept the thoughts, to accept the feelings, to really be mindful, to be aware of what's happening for you in that moment. Yeah. Because, once we become so busy with life, with work, with family, with all of these responsibilities, it can be really difficult or even impossible for some people to really know what's happening for themselves in that moment. Mm-hmm. And so, it can be easy to sort of push away all of those difficult feelings, the stress, the anxiety, everything. And so you really don't know what's happening for you. So that can be a really good first step for somebody, is to start practicing mindfulness.
Cool. So when you say mindfulness, that means an everyday or like a mindfulness meditation practice, or both?
I mean, you can really practice mindfulness pretty much anywhere. It is a practice though, so sometimes, I've seen clients in the past where they've never heard of mindfulness and they're interested, they're intrigued, but they're kind of like, well, am I going to be able to do it? And literally you can do it sitting on a bus, or walking down the street, because it really is a practice where you're using yourself as the tool. To become more aware of yourself and more aware of your surroundings, and to really be able to, especially for somebody that may not be a feeling person, they may not be very comfortable with their own emotions or other people's emotions. It can be a really good practice to start being able to, identify what's happening for them, and, even in that sense, become more aware of what other people might be feeling as well, and to just build up that practice of mindfulness in their own life.
One of the things that I found really difficult, like with the mindfulness practice, is it's like it comes to the ability to do that comes to me in waves where, like, if I'm very driven on a goal, right? So I'm working really hard towards a goal. I have this expectation. It's hard to come down from that to a place of like, okay, it's okay, whatever happens, just being aware, I guess being at peace with the present moment, really.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it can be tough. It can be tough because you have, 50 things on your to-do list, or, you're wanting to get 10 things done that day. So you're looking ahead. You're not looking at the one task in front of you necessarily. You're thinking, okay, I need to get to this point. So it really is about slowing things down, being okay with just one thing at a time, or, whatever you can accomplish. And just remembering to be mindful of how you are in that moment. If you're feeling really anxious, the chances of you getting everything done, that day is probably not likely. And if so, it could potentially be detrimental to you, because at the end of the day, you're going to be, feeling that sluggishness, or feeling, really overwhelmed, potentially, if you're prone to panic attacks, potentially having a panic attack. So, really being aware of yourself and your abilities in that moment, and being okay with not having to do everything.
Yeah. So would you say then, for someone that's prone to panic attacks or anxiety, to like put self-care then at the top of the list above, finances, food, like everything else, like make that be the priority?
I would say that self-care should probably be at the top of everybody's list, no matter what's happening for you. And, on my blog, I write about mental health topics. And this month in particular, in July, I'm going to be focusing on self-care, because it's just so important. And it's just, I feel like something that a lot of people kind of put on the side burner, or, they'll do at the end of the night. But by that time, it could be too late, right? Because the stress of what's happening in their lives, or the anxiety that they're experiencing, can build up, and it can be difficult to unwind all of that. So I am a huge advocate of self-care, and being able to really take care of yourself, even before you take care of others. A lot of people ask, as a counselor, you support a lot of people, and it's extremely important for me to be able to take care of myself, and to consider, what foods am I eating, am I getting enough sleep, and things like that, because it can really impact my ability to help others. So, it's the same thing for work or life or family, everything, right? So.
So in terms, so you talked about food being one of your self-care practices. How else does that look like for you, self-care? How are you practicing it?
Definitely mindfulness. I try to get enough sleep. I have a 1-year-old cat, so sometimes that's hard because it wakes me up in the night. But definitely sleep is very important. Journaling is huge for me. Any kind of self-expression, I think through my blog, that's been really helpful, because I write about topics that are really interesting to me, but also I feel like I'm supporting other people at the same time. So any kind of form of self-expression. And it can be different for everybody. Some people enjoy music, playing music or listening to music, more art-based type of self-care strategies, things like that. For me, it's writing. I really enjoy writing. Lately, I've been very interested in essential oils and how they can really increase your well-being throughout your whole life. And there's just so many different ways that they can help reduce stress and anxiety and things like that. So that's been a huge source of self-care for me in the last couple months. Definitely exercise, because that can be a difficult one, trying to get motivated, but even just going for a walk and trying to clear your head can be really, really, really big. But, as I said before, like even as a counselor, it can be really important for me to reach out and talk to someone, have my own supervision, things like that. So, it's sort of a human thing to need to take care of yourself and to consider what's most important to you and what will help you specifically.
The walking thing definitely helped me that time to calm down. The sun was out. Like, I remember everything about that moment, I think, because it's like a trauma, I guess, when air supply is cut off, it's like everything is on alert. You kind of remember it. And the sun and the breeze and the natural landscape, being outside, that, kind of brought me present to like, okay, I'm here right now. This is what's real right now. Not my business failing or crumbling because I can't, figure this out.
Yeah, so it sounds like in that moment it sort of forced you to really focus on yourself and your surroundings in that moment.
Yeah.
So if you could sort of apply the same, foundation to other moments where you're not necessarily experiencing that, such a heightened sense of anxiety, it can really help to really, alleviate that stress and anxiety that you are feeling.
Yeah. So like when it comes to just constantly bringing up things mentally that are not true, just practicing the mindfulness meditation and the self-care alone, you found to be the fix?
Not necessarily. Yeah, I mean, if somebody's having, we call it catastrophic thinking, so always thinking the worst, always thinking, even if, you're thinking just your daily life, something really bad is going to happen, but there's no evidence for that. I mean, yes, it could happen because life is risky, life is dangerous, but there's nothing that's saying like something bad is going to happen today. So that's catastrophic thinking, really thinking that something really bad is going to happen. And so what can be helpful with that is CBT techniques, cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. So it's probably too big of a scope to get into today, but one way that you can help to reduce those thoughts is by writing it down. Writing it down and thinking, what is the possibility that this could happen today? Even using a scale on 1 to 10, what's the likelihood? And then thinking about alternatives. What else could happen? And thinking about if this didn't happen, what else could happen, like more positive types of things. And that's sort of like the underlying principles of CBT. So if anyone's interested in that, I can share some more information about that maybe after the video.
Yeah, so is that what your anxiety pocket ebook is about? That's the freebie, everyone, that's in the description.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the ebook for anxiety is really outlining a lot of what we talked about today. So it's an overview of what anxiety is, what can cause it, the typical symptoms, and then some helpful things that you can do. But it's really a bit of reading about being able to understand it a little bit more. And I tried to write it in a way where it's not too scientific, because you can really get into like the scientific chemical reactions that kind of happen in the body, because there's a whole bunch of things that happen.
Yeah.
But I tried to write it in a way that was could be understood, and so that you can be more aware of what's happening inside of you. And then I also have an e-workbook that goes along with that. That one is paid, and that one explores a lot of the different strategies that we've talked about today. So a lot of mindfulness, there's visualizations, there's self-care, a self-care section where you can really determine what can help you take care of yourself, so that you're not leading down that path of having panic attacks because of your blog and things like that. That should be really, giving you enjoyment and things like that, right? So it's the e-workbook is a lot more practical, and the free ebook is more information about anxiety and what happens and things like that.
So the workbook allows you to kind of do like the journaling CBT technique that you talked about, right? To kind of explore why you keep going down these negative thoughts all the time that aren't necessarily true, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's very practical. So there's, it'll give you an example of what you can do and then walk you through the steps. So it's quite helpful in that sense. And if somebody does sign up for the free anxiety ebook, then the first chapter is actually in the same Google Drive that you have access to. So you can actually see an example of what the e-workbook is, so that you can decide if it's helpful. And the first chapter is all about mindfulness, so you can see exactly what you're getting.
I think Nelson asked first thing in the morning, and I'm not sure when he asked that, but I'm thinking possibly the journaling is there a special time to journal?
That's a good question. I would say you can journal at any time, because it's sort of a way of expressing the emotions or the feelings that you have. So you can either do it through prompts, journal prompts, or you can just sort of freestyle write, whatever's coming to mind. And it can be a way of sort of, unloading those thoughts, unloading those feelings, so that they're not, sort of weighing you down so much. And it can be really effective for some people to feel a lot better, a lot less stressed, ease the anxiety that they're feeling, things like that.
Yeah, so in your anxiety workbook, there are journal prompts in there?
Yes. Yep. So there's a section on self-care, there's mindfulness, visualizations, there's other things where you walk through like a sort of a scent, experiential scent strategy, things like that.